Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The first time audiences were introduced to the diminutive creature named Yoda, we had no idea who he was. Heck, for all we knew, he could have been some type of carnivorous swamp creature waiting to lure naive moisture farmers to their deaths. And at best, he was some type of pond scum looking to steal Luke's rations and maybe even his X-Wing.
Let him have it. R2.
At least that's what Luke thought, and so did the rest of the audience. I mean, you guys remember, Luke goes to Dagobah solely because he had a hallucination of old Ben Kenobi while dying of hypothermia on Hoth.
Ben?
You will go to the Dagobah system.
Dagobah system.
There you will learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me.
Jedi Master instructed me. I'm guessing Luke was expecting an even older and more wrinkly individual than old Ben. Little did Luke understand that little green creature standing before him was actually the Master Yoda that he sought out. And what made Yoda even more interesting was the way he talked.
Like we're being watched.
Away, put your weapon. I mean you no harm. I am wondering, why are you here?
I'm looking for someone.
And this wasn't some fluke or brain fart that was inspired by someone pointing a blaster at your face. This is just how Yoda spoke all the time. Even when Yoda reveals himself to be the wise Jedi Master that Luke is looking for, he continues speaking in this weird pattern.
What know you, ready? For 800 years have I trained Jedi. My own counsel will I keep on who is to be trained.
And apparently for 800 years, more or less, he also spoke that way.
Hard to see the dark side is.
Why does he do this? Is it something cultural? Maybe his species developed speech and language in a different way. Maybe Yoda's native alien tongue structures sentences differently, and so when he learned Galactic Basic, he figured out all the vocabulary, but just wasn't able to rewire his brain to properly arrange things in the way we usually do. But then again, when we hear another member of his species, Yaddle, speak, she doesn't talk like him at all.
Speaking on behalf of the Council, there's no reason to cause undue alarm.
It is, of course, possible that Yaddle trained herself to speak with almost a perfect core words accent. She core washed herself, especially after being ridiculed by her peers in the Jedi Order. Teenagers are still teenagers. Even if they are Jedi, they can still be mean and exclude people who are different. I guess we won't really find out how Yoda's species is supposed to talk until Baby Gogurt begins saying words in like 50 years. Now, there are some theories floating around that maybe Yoda has some brain damage, from all the duels he's fought in, or maybe he has a learning disability or some type of speech disability. But if you listen closely to what he says, he's quite fluent in Galactic Basic. His vocabulary is extensive, and he pluralizes nouns the right way as well.
Premonitions? Premonitions?
He also conjugates verbs properly depending on the situation.
Yourself you speak of, or someone you know?
Where he deviates from normal speech patterns is how he structures his sentence, how he arranges the subject, verb, and object. For instance, in the sentence, I love hot dogs, I is the subject, love is the verb, and hot dog is the object. In the English language, the subject generally comes first, followed by the verb, then followed by the object. We're not 100% sure why it evolved this way, but I do have some theories. First of all, I have to state that subject, verb, object, as far as a sentence structure, is not the rule in all languages. Many of the more complicated and, in my opinion, artistic languages like Japanese, Russian, Arabic have more flexible sentence structures, as in you can switch around the order of subject, verb, and object. Only 42% of languages like English, Italian, and Spanish are subject, verb, object dominant. Now, Russian and Arabic are technically in this category, but as we mentioned before, they are quite flexible. Another 45% of languages are structured as subject, object, verb, like Japanese, Korean, and many Indian languages like Hindi, Tamil, and Telugu. And so instead of saying, I love hot dogs like you would in English, in a subject, object, verb sentence structure, you would say, I hot dog love, or I am a hot dog lover, which kind of sounds like you're a hot dog. That's why it doesn't really work in English as well. Now, most languages, like 87% of languages, have the subject come first. And then there are variations whether the object or the verb comes next. But 87% of languages. And this is because it's a more efficient way of speaking that follows the natural thought process of most human beings. We want to know what the subject is doing to the object. If you turn it the other way and you start it off with a passive object first, we then have to wait to figure out what is happening to that object and who's doing it. And these two factors are a lot more important than the actual object. And that's because human beings, we generally are impatient. We do not prefer to wait. And so our brain prioritizes understanding who the subject is first, and then everything else follows. Especially when you take a language like English into account, which is known to be very efficient and economic and relatively easy to learn. It's probably also one of the less beautiful languages out there, but there's a reason why it's the language used by most international organizations and professions, especially in the business community, because, time equals money. Now, when Yoda speaks, if you listen closely, the subject almost never comes first. Instead, he usually adopts a very strange pattern: object, subject, verb.
Allow this appointment lightly. The council does not.
In this sentence, the first thing that comes up is appointment, and that is the object. Then the second thing that comes up is lightly, that's the verb. And then finally, it's revealed what the subject is: the council. But then he follows it up with another weird sentence structure where he uses the verb first, and then the object, then the subject.
Disturbing is this move by Chancellor Palpatine.
There are very few languages in our world that use verb, object, subject as the structure. This includes classical Arabic, biblical Hebrew, Filipino, and also Maori. What's even less common are object, subject, verb sentences that Yoda actually predominantly uses. As far as we know, there are only two very obscure languages that uses this sentence structure. One is Tabati, a Papuan language spoken in Indonesia by less than 100 people nowadays. And another is the language of the Warao indigenous people in Venezuela. And so when Yoda speaks like this, it is extremely unusual for audiences to hear. Now, stress and anxiety can cause us to mess up sentences, grammar, and fumble words around, but that's not what I sense coming from Yoda. His words are meticulously placed out of order, and he speaks with a calm and patient demeanor. There are also disorders like aphasia, which symptoms include damage to the part of the brain where communication is done. But again, Yoda seems very lucid and not suffering from any sort of mental decline. And then there's things like obsessive compulsive disorder, which can change speech patterns, but usually involves a lot of repetition. And again, it doesn't really seem like this fits what's going on with Yoda. Which leaves me with my last and most likely theory that Yoda at one point in his life consciously decided to start talking in this way. You see, the subject, verb, object sentence structure in English can be broken, especially if you have a dramatic flair. For instance, I could say, pants. Where we're going, we won't need pants. Or something more simple like, this I love. Why do we occasionally speak like this in English? Why do poets and authors, public speakers occasionally talk in this fashion? Because it's different. It is dramatic at times too, and it forces a person to perk up and listen to what otherwise could be a very boring piece of information you're trying to give out. This is why when I talk, for instance, I move my hands around, I alter my pitch and my tone, and this is all designed to get people's attention. If I spoke like this to you in person, you'd probably want to punch me in the face, but for certain, type of interactions, it's important to do this. In a lot of ways, what Yoda is doing is specifically tailored for an audience that he's dealt with for hundreds of years. Young and patient Jedi younglings with attention issues. I mean, remember, Yoda has taught almost every Jedi who's made it through the Order, and I feel like at one point, he came to the conclusion that it was just easier to get impatient, distracted kids to listen to him by speaking in this very strange way. It sounds funny, it's different, and that's good when it comes to getting people's attention. It also surrounds him with a mysterious and wise aura because no one else really speaks like him, and his words are oftentimes very valuable to listen to. One of the major reasons why I think this is because Yoda actually does speak normally from time to time. I mean, look at this conversation he has with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, I don't even know what I'm doing here. We're wasting our time.
I cannot teach him. The boy has no patience.
Yoda might have been Obi-Wan Kenobi's superior at one point, but now Ben Kenobi is a Force ghost, and when you join the Cosmic Force, your sense of the world and time itself changes completely. Kenobi has become a lot wiser, and so Yoda now sees Kenobi as a peer, maybe even a teacher in some ways, and so he drops the strange sentence structure, and he adopts the more standard subject, verb, object, like the rest of us. And immediately after, when he's talking to Luke, who's kind of wet behind the ears, he adopts this strange sentence structure once again, because Luke might as well be a toddler compared to Yoda when it comes to age and experience. And so Yoda's speech is just another tool in his belt. After all, this is what Yoda is more than anything else, a professor of life and the Force. And actually, when George Lucas was asked, why does Yoda speak like this, his answer was the following. Mostly we had these strange languages and voices that were created out of foreign languages. I didn't want to go through a whole movie where everybody is reading subtitles. He had a lot of dialogue, so I had to come up with a language that was alien, but still understandable. So I reversed everything around. The language was designed to make you focus on the boring philosophical lessons. I think it's really funny that George Lucas calls his own philosophy and mythology boring. It's usually a sign of a great artist when they can be so critical of their own work. Although when Frank Oz, the puppeteer and voice for Yoda, was asked by Dave Filoni why Yoda speaks this way, he said it's because Yoda wants to honor his own master, who also spoke in this way. It is common for actors to create their own backstories for the characters they're playing so that, they can understand the motives of the characters better. It's usually not canon, but that's another theory. Anyway, guys, that's the video for today. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Why does Yoda speak in such a weird way? As usual, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.
This one, a long time have I watched.